Good morning, Mr. Pretorius. Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Chair.
Morning, Chair.
Mr. Pretorius.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Agrizzi, we finished yesterday at paragraph 12.6 of your affidavit, and that is where there's reference to the video exhibit S1.
That is correct, Chair. May I add something? Chair asked me a question.
Yeah. Oh,
yesterday.
yes, there was some homework that was to be done for delivery after lunch, but we didn't continue after lunch. Yes.
That was beyond my control, unfortunately.
Yes, no. I'm happy that you are here, and I'm very happy that you are very determined to make sure that this commission is assisted and that the nation gets to know what you know.
We will, my Chair, we will.
Thank you very much.
Can I respond to you, Chair, with regards to the balances?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
If you turn to the second file, annexure that is referred to is 584, page 584.
That's exhibit S2, or
Correct.
Is that on the bundle other than the one that we were using yesterday?
it's the bundle that was handed to you, Chair, yesterday. It's the second volume of the statement and annexures. We've referred to it as exhibit S2.
Oh, yes, okay, I've got it. Page
Page 584.
584.
Yes.
Thank you.
If I can just give you a bit of background, this is a page.
I've got it, yeah.
This is a page out of the Black Book, one of them that I managed to find. If you look at the first one, it says January to February 2016.
Yes.
And the word says recon. I know my handwriting is very bad. It says recon,
Yes.
transfer, TRF, which stands for transfer,
Yeah.
back to petty cash,
Yes.
J fund sale, and an amount of 107,000 Rand off order. Okay. What that basically means is that from the order that came in, 107,000 Rand was used out of a separate petty cash, which is the normal company petty cash. But there was a shortage, so they used 107,000 Rand from the delivery to replace the petty cash so that it would balance.
Okay.
Then on the 18th of February 2016, an amount of 3.2 million was received. And then a week later, on the 25th of the 2nd, 2016, an amount of 2.8 million was received. So the balance in the safe was 6 million Rand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The page next to it just refers to persons that received it. And then if you flip over to page 586,
I'm sorry. The page on page 584,
yes, sir.
the photocopy page that is next to the one that you have dealt with,
Yes,
has got names.
correct.
Are those names of persons to whom payments were made?
That is correct.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I see that it itself does not have a date. Is it for the 18th February 2016 as reflected in the first page, or it's on there for another date?
That would have occurred after the 25th of February.
Okay, thank you.
I have another page.
Is that 586?
586.
Yes.
That is a loose page that was in the book, but refers to January 2015. And there you will see
Yes.
delivery to GW, which is the initials of Gavin Watson.
Yes.
Lindsay, just let me see, collect, which meant that Lindsay Watson would have collected it and checked it. AVT stands for Andries van Tonder, which means he would have delivered 5.4 million rand.
Oh, okay. So there might not be an M after 4, but we're talking millions.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. If you look at the bottom, you'll see I've calculated and worked out the balance that was left, because this would always be verified with somebody there. So the balance that was left was 2.185 million rand after there'd been payments out.
Yeah.
Okay. At the bottom of the page next to it, you'll see that a balance was then 2.6 million rand. Unfortunately, there's a page in between that's missing. We don't know where it is. I never had ownership of these black books. They were always in the safe.
Yes, okay.
Okay.
And the handwriting on page 586, Mr. Agrizzi, is that also your handwriting?
That's my record keeping, yes.
Is it your writing that appears on all these pages from that book?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
January 2015, you will see there's a reconciliation there that says received. GLA refers to Greg, Lake and Allen for Gavin. You'll see an amount of 5.4.
I'm sorry, are you still at page 586?
Sorry, I flipped over already to 588. Sorry, my mistake.
Oh. Five 88.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. January 20.
It's actually January 2016, sorry. It looks like a 16 or 15, one of the two. I'm sorry, I didn't want to make changes to it.
Yes, okay, okay.
I write with a fountain pen, Your Honor, so sometimes I slip.
Yeah, you were telling me something about that page.
Yes.
Just start afresh.
It says on the top there, recon, chair, and I would do that because the book would be left in Gavin Watson's safe.
Does recon stand for
Reconciliation.
Okay. Received GLA.
GLA stands for Greg, Lake and Allen for Gavin.
Perhaps you should spell that name for the record, please.
GREGLACON hyphen ALLIN.
I-N or E-N?
And how do you pronounce it?
Greg, Lake and Allen.
Okay.
Sorry, not a hyphen, it's a dash between the Laken and the Allen.
And the Allen, how's that spelled?
ALLIN, if I recall correctly.
Okay.
Okay. Then you'll see an amount of 5.4 million rand. And the person that reconned it with me is Andries van Tonder.
So that's AVT, not AUT.
No, AVT.
AVT standing for Andries van Tonder.
Correct.
Okay. Yes.
And the split there is not actually an expense. What I did was I used the word expense, but it was the safes, number 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
Okay. May I move on, Chair?
So the total at the bottom of that page is the balance, or what is it?
5,487,
Uh-huh.
comma 500.
Is that the balance?
Yes, because there would have been some money left in the safe.
Oh, okay.
All right, so the balance there would be what was currently at that stage in the safe.
Okay.
Chair, if I could ask you to go to page 600.
Okay.
If I may just interject, all these documents emanate from the Black Book,
Correct.
or the Black Books.
Correct.
Yes. 600.
600, if you look at it, it says, and I can't read the date properly because I seem to have lost my glasses here, but it says
What?
February recon. It says received,
Is that the one on the right-hand side that you are looking at?
the one on the right-hand side.
Yes.
The one on the left denotes the names,
Oh, okay.
all right. The one on the right-hand side says received 6 million.
Yes.
Then there was a reimbursement back to petty cash for 107.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was some payments,
Mm-hmm.
just the totals, not the actual individuals.
Yeah.
Then there was an amount of 3,425, 500 left in Gavin's safe, which was checked by Lindsay Watson.
Mm.
We also left a note in the safe that specific time, and it was just a note denoting in each safe how much it was in the safe. So that's why I just said note left.
Before you go on to another page, in the photographed sheet on the right-hand side,
Yes.
on page 600 of Exhibit S2, there is, next to the number 4, an amount of 110,000 Rand, and in brackets after that PG. Do you know from your own knowledge what that denotes?
Yes, that was Patrick Gillingham, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
Again, page 600 is your handwriting, is it?
Yes, it is, Chair.
On some of the pages of this exhibit, these little pages from the Black Book, you find 2 pages, as is the case in page 600, at page 600.
Yes.
What's the relationship between those 2 pages when there are 2 of them? Is the one page for the names of people to whom money was paid and the other a reconciliation, or what is the relationship, or is it just coincidental?
I think, Chair, it's just coincidental because if I recall correctly, these specific pages were separate from the book.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we may continue.
Okay. If you go, Chair, to page 602.
Yes.
That just denotes that on the top, that there would have been a previous page that said it was checked by 3 people, Andries van Tonda, Angelo Agrizzi, and JVZ stands for Jacques van Zyl.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There is the name that there's a word that looks like Ishmael there.
That's right.
Yeah, who was that?
What that basically means is the list that you see in front of you and the names that you see in front of you there,
Yes.
that money was collected by the director Ishmael.
Oh, he was one of the directors.
Yes.
And what's his surname, or is that his surname?
He changed his surname. His surname was Mwaba,
Yeah.
and it changed to Dekane.
Oh, okay.
Would you spell both, please, if you can?
Mwaba, I'm going on memory, MNCWABE. Dekane was DIKANE.
Yeah, I think it's in your statement. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so the page that we are looking at page 602, the page from the book, Black Book,
Yes.
depicts names of persons to whom certain amounts reflected on the page were given to Ishmael to distribute to them.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Correct, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And what appears at the bottom, is it the total when you add up all of those amounts, or is it the balance in the safe?
No, that's the total. I actually didn't check that, Chair. I must apologize.
Sorry?
I didn't check that, but I presume
Yes.
it will be the total, because that's how I normally would do it.
Okay, all right. Well, if it was stacks, you would just like that, but this is not, it's not in stacks.
Yes, unfortunately.
Okay, all right. Okay, you may proceed.
I think, Chair, that is in response to your question that you asked me, and then I would like to clarify a point that seems to have come across.
Yes, before you do that, let's just make sure we complete the point to which your evidence in regard to these pages relates. One of the questions was about how many people were, so to speak, on the payroll of BOSASA, but now the payroll I'm talking about is not the one for employees, in terms of the monthly bribes. That was one of the questions. Does this answer that, these pages, or not really?
These pages answer about, I'd say, 50%.
About 50%?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't count. I don't know whether you counted, whether 50% would be more or less what number? Did you have a chance to count? 20?
No.
Much
40,
more?
40, yeah.
About 40?
Yeah.
So your estimate, would your estimate be that at least at some stage while you were with BOSASA, people who were paid cash monthly may well have been around 80 or thereabouts?
I would say close to that, Chair. I would
Close, yeah.
I would have to think about that. I didn't really think
but
about it.
it's an estimate, but you say 80 might just be around the correct figure.
That received illegal cash payments, yes.
Yeah, that received cash payments.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yes. Okay, that was the one question, so that clarifies it. The other question, I didn't write them down. The other question, do you remember? I'm trying to see which ones we have been able to answer.
The other question, I know there was a question regarding vaults, and there was a question.
Oh, no.
Perhaps
The one-
Advocate Pretorius would just clarify.
I think I think Mr. Pretorius did write down at least my questions. Mr. Pretorius, are you able to remind me what I had asked?
Just looking for the note, Chair, if you bear with me.
Oh, I think the other question may well have been, oh no, it was the one about how much the
Was the
cash
minimum
was.
balance.
Yeah, that was answered. What I didn't ask, which I can ask while Mr. Pretorius is looking, I did ask. I also asked about other gifts.
And the irregularity, Chair.
Yeah, the irregular gifts that may have been, I think you clarified that they may not have been given monthly like cash, but
Yes.
there was a certain amount of regularity.
Yes.
Is that right?
Correct.
But what I don't know whether I asked was whether you would have an idea about what those would be in terms of monetary value per month, per 2 months, per year. I don't know apart from the monthly cash payments, is that, I don't know if I asked that, is that something that's easy to say, or it would need to check, you would need to check?
Chair, what I can do is draw up a schedule.
Yeah.
If Advocate Pretorius requests
Yes.
that, I can do that.
Okay, let's...
You mentioned the regularity or otherwise of what we refer to as other benefits,
Yes.
other than cash.
Yes.
You also at a stage queried the total amount of bribes approximately per day or per period.
For a period,
of time.
yeah. I think that's what...
And then you also asked how regularly the safe was filled at some stage.
Oh, yes.
And then how many people were paid at a time, but we've
Yes.
dealt more or less with those questions.
Yeah.
Can
You in terms of how regularly the Mr. Watson's safe was filled, you did indicate.
Weekly.
You said weekly, sometimes even quicker than that. And in terms of the number of people, or in terms of cash payments monthly, we now have an idea. And in terms of other benefits, I think that might still have to be checked, but that can come later. It's not
Yes,
urgent.
can I say what the legal team's intention is in this regard?
Yes.
At the evidence, the end of the evidence, we will do a sweep of all outstanding issues that might have been
okay.
raised by you, or that might
That's-
then be logically outstanding,
Yes.
and we will deal with them.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Okay, thank you, Mr. Agrizzi. Mr. Pretorius, you may continue.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Chair, could I raise the point?
Oh, you wanted to
I don't want to
raise,
interject
yes,
you.
please.
But I think what is important is that I clear up any misconceptions that might have happened
Yes,
yesterday.
please do so.
I will. When I refer to disposal of people, it is a
Yes.
mean term in terms of getting rid of people, where I had experienced many a time where senior people would have to be dismissed, fired, but they would go through, there would be a rigorous process of discrediting the person in social media, in the media, and also with everybody else possible. So that's what I meant by disposal, because literally you're taking a person's life, their family, and you're throwing them in the dustbin. That's basically what I was trying to clarify.
Yeah.
And I've seen it over the last years, so many.
So before they would be disposed of, as you say,
Yes.
would there be a certain period during which they would be discredited, or
Totally.
the discrediting would happen after?
Discrediting would happen during and after.
Okay. Well, that may tie in maybe with a term that you used also when you were talking about that. I can't remember whether you used the term terminate people.
Yes.
But I remember you used a term, and I in response, I asked you to explain, because I said, under apartheid, sometimes the term taken out was used.
Yes.
And it had a certain meaning. In terms of the terminology that you used, you didn't mean that people would be killed, or did you?
No.
Yes,
I didn't
okay.
mean that people would be
You
killed.
you just meant that they would be got rid of from the company.
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you.
Thank you, it's clarified.
Thank you, Chair. In the next few paragraphs, Mr. Agrizzi, you deal with matters relating to the handling of cash and who handled it and in what manner. May I refer you to paragraph 12.7 of your statement? What was the case in regard to what may be termed high-profile officials? We'll get to detail later.
The case was Gavin Watson would deal with them himself, Chair.
And particularly over the months of December and January each year, or December each year,
That is correct, Chair.
what would happen then?
That is correct. Occasionally, if I say occasionally, he would visit the people and do the special payments himself. At one stage, right in, I think, I can't remember the exact date, I went with Mr. Watson to do Christmas, what I called the Christmas run. And, you know, at that stage already, I said to him, please, can you keep detailed records? Because, you know, anything can happen to you, and what then? And he basically made it clear that he just ignored me. And when I asked him again, he basically said, I don't use paper. I've been trained to use my memory. I don't write anything down. I haven't signed anything, and I haven't got a secretary. That's basically what was said.
Right. And then in paragraph 12.8, you give general evidence as to the method used if someone came to you asking for a favor or any benefit. What was that?
Well, I'd realized after a while that people would come to me and says, Gavin said, please, can you organize this for me? Can you hire me a car? Can you fly me down to PE? Can you book my kid in a hotel? And eventually I would not do it. And I would actually phone up Mr. Watson and say to Mr. Watson, this person is asking for A, B, C, and D. What do you want me to do?
Would he then approve or not approve?
He would tell me and confirm the instruction to me.
So that was your way of making sure that whatever you did was with his approval?
I wouldn't do anything without his approval or his instruction.
Yes, thank you.
From what you knew, and during the period that you were responsible for cash transactions and the keeping of records, in the sense that it was up to you to reconcile, I mean responsible in that sense, are you able to say whether Gavin Watson would have known himself of everything in relation to payments, and in particular whether he knew of all the payments that left BOSASA for the purpose of bribery?
Chair, the answer is actually very simple, that I would not do anything without his instruction, without him knowing about it. Otherwise, I could be held responsible. And quite simply, I wouldn't take risk, you know, not doing something without him knowing about it. It's too dangerous to try something like that.
I'm dealing, Mr. Agrizzi, with paragraph 12.9. Do you believe, from your own knowledge, that Gavin Watson knew the extent of payments going out that weren't recorded?
He knew the extent. If you look at my response, I don't think he knew the extent, because there was one specific incident where Chair, I don't like an untidy office or an untidy desk, and there was papers lying around, and I grabbed a refuse bag that was lying there to put the rubbish in, and in the bag I saw 70,000 rand, and I showed him and I said, you know, you need to be more careful. So I don't think he actually even knew the extent of what he was paying out.
Is it possible?
Sorry, the amount. Sorry.
Is it possible that he really didn't care much in terms of what was going out, obviously to a certain extent? In other words, maybe if my money or my company's money was being paid, I would want to know that all the money that is being paid is money that I intend to be paid, and that it goes to the people that I intend it to go to. But I don't know, maybe if there is just too much money lying around, too much money, you might end up, you know, I mean, you told us the other day 6 million rand per month was just a drop in the ocean.
Yes.
So maybe that might have been the reason why he might not have been as careful as somebody else might have been in terms of making sure what money goes out at the full extent. Is that something that you think is possible?
Most definitely. He told me on numerous occasions that my job is to make money. His job is to make sure that he spends money. To him, it meant nothing.
The amount that you just mentioned that you found in the refuse bag, what was that amount again, please?
70,000 rand.
Earlier on, I thought you said 7, but I think you are saying 70,000 rand.
70,000
and I see it is 70,000 rand in this statement, yeah.
Right, and then
I'm sorry. Was he shocked that there was such a lot of money in a refuse bag?
I showed him. He was,
Yeah.
oh, well, the attitude was, oh, well, luckily he found it.
It wasn't a big deal.
No, I was hoping he was going to give it to me, Chair.
Yeah. Okay, all right.
All right, in the remainder of paragraph 12.9, Mr. Agrizzi, you deal with the drop safe. You've already given that evidence.
Correct.
We don't need to repeat it. And then in paragraph 12.10, you deal with the issue very briefly of shortages under your watch. What was the position?
There was never any shortages. We made sure, I always made sure I'd never do it alone. I always made sure there was somebody with me, either Jacques van Zyl or Andries van Tonder or Lindsay Watson with me, so that my integrity wouldn't be questioned in that situation.
Is that when money was being physically handled?
Yes.
Then in paragraph 12.11, you deal with the topic that you've been questioned about from the chair in relation to favors other than cash payments. Would you describe those briefly for the chair, please?
Well, Chair, there were numerous other favors, and there were vehicle repairs being done for people. There were school fees settled. There was travel arrangements that were done. And it was merely what happened there was we paid it through the books, and that was eventually picked up by the SIU investigation. And thereafter, the preferred mechanism was using cash or using it through an arm's length company that would be registered as Mr. Watson instructed.
Vehicle repairs, how were they done? An outside garage or an internal facility to BOSASA?
Well, there's two stances. The one is an outside garage where they would then invoice Corano or BOSASA and the garage. And the other one was we had an on-site workshop at one of our complexes which we had set up to deal with the high volume of vehicles that needed minor services. So people would take their cars there and they would sort it out.
Your reference to Corano, is that the same entity that you referred to yesterday?
Correct.
Okay. When you talked about accounting for these expenses, please provide the chair with a little detail. How were they accounted for? Under what head or in what category of expense?
Well, the category that we put under is either the operational expense or alternatively marketing expenses, and they would normally be allocated to a company where the person who received the benefit gave benefit to. So if Mr. X was from BOSASA Security and he was helping BOSASA Security, the expense would normally go through that division.
Are you personally aware of vehicles being serviced for any particular individual?
Yes,
that you recall?
I am aware of some vehicles that have been serviced for specific individuals, Chair.
In paragraph 12.12, you mention a name. Who is that person? What is his connection with the matters you're dealing with?
This gentleman was the security, I think, liaison, I could call him, at AXA. His name is Ruben Pile.
And you say his vehicle was serviced?
Amongst others, yes.
And who authorized the servicing of that particular vehicle?
Well, it would be authorized by Joe Gumedi, because Joe Gumedi at that stage was in charge of security.
All right, just look at paragraph 12.12, please. The third sentence, you say in your affidavit that you would authorize the servicing,
I would,
which is correct.
both are correct, because he would come to me with it and I would then finalize it. And remember, Chair, if I can explain, I signed off everything. That was the rule. I had
Yeah.
to sign off everything.
Yeah, yeah.
So you say,
I guess
Sorry.
that must have been in part because Mr. Governor Watson didn't sign anything.
Correct.
Yeah.
So to answer the question correctly would be to say that the request to do it was through Joe Gumedi and the authorization was through me.
Now, the person mentioned there, who was he employed by, or what was the connection between, what was the relationship between him and BOSASA?
That was in the early days when BOSASA received the AXA contract for the guarding of the multi-story car level at OR Tambo.
Yes. So was he somebody from the company that awarded that contract?
He was involved with it, yes, as far as I know.
Yeah, okay. But he was not an employee of BOSASA?
No, he was employed by AXA. He was employed by AXA.
Oh, yeah, okay. Thank you. So, did you view the servicing of his motor vehicle as part of BOSASA's bribery to people that would make it easy for BOSASA to get contracts?
Yes, I did.
That's how you viewed it?
I did.
Yes.
I'd become blunt to it.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
thus far, Mr. Agrizzi, and in general terms, you've testified as to payments made to various people and the methods used to effect those payments. You've also mentioned very briefly receipt
I'm
of cash.
sorry, Mr. Pretorius, to interrupt you. The naming at paragraph 12.12 has not been mentioned. So when you read the transcript, you would have to look for this bundle to see what was that name. Is there a particular reason that it's not being mentioned?
It may have been mentioned softly, Chair, but it was mentioned.
Okay.
Is that correct? You've mentioned the name of the person there.
Yep, the name was Mr. Ruben Pillay.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay.
Just to go back a step, Mr. Agrizzi, you've given evidence thus far, amongst other things, of the general methods used to make cash payments and what happened in the BOSASA offices in that respect. You will give further detailed evidence in that regard in due course.
Most definitely.
You've also mentioned receipt of cash.
Yes.
In other words, in order to make these payments, BOSASA had to have in its possession large amounts of cash to the extent that you've already testified.
Correct.
The next section of your affidavit then deals with how BOSASA obtained cash.
That is correct, Chair.
In 13.1, you deal with one such method of obtaining cash or concealing cash transactions. What was that method?
One such method, Chair, was to issue a cash check and to cash the check at the bank. Then a fictitious invoice would be created to justify the cash transaction. The fictitious invoice would be created in the name of a company that was nearing liquidation or in liquidation, or a company that was about to place in liquidation.
Why was that done?
Because there would be very little queries or recourse for the check.
And would the company that is chosen, would the company know about the fictitious invoice or not really? Or sometimes they would know, sometimes they would not know?
I don't think they would. I didn't do the invoicing, so I found out about the practice, but I think they wouldn't have known.
Okay.
All right. Then you go further in paragraph 13.2 of your affidavit, and you relate how, in relation to cashing checks at the bank and the issuing of fake invoices, these were done in the name of other entities. Please tell the Chair what happened.
What they would do is they would raise fake invoices, which would be in a small startup name, and there was no VAT numbers, because the last thing is to mess around with revenue services. And companies that had delivered perhaps a small product or service, they would just regenerate those invoices. And, they were not used more than once or twice. But I recall a company called Gwetlo Events, which
Spell
was...
that, please. Is that KGWETLO?
Correct.
Yes.
Gwetlo Events was a company that belonged to a Mr. and Mrs. Brian Gwebu, who previously used to actually work at the BOSASA Group, and where they had a hiring of plates and tents and that kind of company. Then the accountant would draw up the invoices and book it to Gwetlo Events, which was, I got a bit annoyed because I thought, it's one of our employees that passed away. It wasn't a very good thing to do. But for this reason, they used it, was because they could avert any potential queries from the South African Revenue Services or from the auditors.
You spoke in a previous answer now, Mr. Agrizzi, of small or startup names. Did you mean small or startup companies?
Yes, companies, Chair.
And you say in paragraph 13.2, with no VAT numbers. What is the significance of that?
Well, the significance of that is these are small companies that have no VAT exposure. They don't have to do returns as yet. And my understanding is that they wouldn't be queried. When I asked the question, I was told it's because they wouldn't be queried.
And you refer to the company called Gwetlo Events and Mr. and Mrs. Gwebu. Did they know, again to your knowledge, of the use of their name on false invoices?
No.
Who drew up the invoices?
Gentlemen that drew up, there were various people that drew up the invoices. The gentleman I know drew up the invoice was Carlos Bonifacio.
The system of issuing false invoices in order to conceal the generation of cash through the issuing of cash checks, did it replace a previous system?
Well, basically, it replaced a system whereby we would write out cash checks and draw it as casual wages. And we would have a dummy. I didn't do it. I wasn't involved with that aspect of it, but I know what was being done. They would draw up a dummy list of employees and then issue cash checks accordingly.
We'll deal in a moment, as I recall, with the reason for the termination of that practice. But before we go on, Mr. Agrizzi, Carlos Bonifacio, what position did he hold in BOSASA?
He was the chief accountant and responsible for the finances of the group.
And his full name's Carlos Bonifacio?
Correct.
You refer to him again in paragraph 13.3. Would you just tell the Commission the circumstances that gave rise to the events that you referred to in that paragraph?
Chair, let me give you a bit of background to it.
Yes.
At one stage, Carlos Bonifacio, they'd known that I was going to whistleblow and declare everything for quite some time, as did quite a lot of other people as well. And at one stage he was involved. He would come through to the meeting and write up a statement and would email statements and that type of thing. And he was going to cooperate. As a matter of fact, his wife even phoned me and said, thank you for helping us get this clear. He was in the process of preparing an affidavit for this purpose of the commission and also for law enforcement.
This is after you had left BOSASA?
Yes, yes. And he was prepared to come clean and draw up everything. He forwarded me portions of the draft affidavit. But then what happened was he got cold feet and he confessed everything to Gavin Watson, who sat with him for 3-4 hours apparently. And he then rattled off exactly who was going to whistleblow to Gavin Watson. And that's what basically happened.
The documents.
Thank you.
The documents that were forwarded to by Mr. Bonifacio, have you kept these documents?
Yes, I have.
Have you made them available to the Commission investigators?
I have.
Chair, to the extent that they may become relevant or may in fact be relevant, we will deal with that issue.
Thank you.
In paragraph 13.4, you perhaps repeat what you said earlier about the use of companies in order to filter payments. Just tell the Chair what you are saying in paragraph 13.4 regarding the use of companies at an arm's length, as you say here.
Chair, there would be companies that we eventually would have to start up on Gavin Watson's instruction, and we would register it and then do exactly the same, but with the fictitious companies, close them down, liquidate them after the taxes had been paid and that. So I think it is a kind of addition to 13.3.
You describe another way of...
I'm sorry, Mr. Pretorius.
Sorry, Chair.
So the creation of these companies was really solely to facilitate fictitious invoices, basically the corruption.
Non-VAT, yeah.
Yes.
Correct.
Thank you. And there were a number of them that were created and then liquidated after some time during your time at BOSASA?
There were. The files were at BOSASA. I can't recall exactly how many. I didn't keep track of that at all.
But quite a number.
I think I can remember 5.
Okay. And are you able to tell whether they would have more or less the same lifespan before they got liquidated, or it really differed from one to another?
I must be honest, I can't recall.
Okay, all right. But would there be maybe one or two where, in regard to which you are able to say, well, maybe after it was created, it was around for a year or 2 or anything like that?
If the Chair allows, I will go and check on my laptop and see if I can get some information from them, and I will bring them.
Okay, no, it's not so important, but it's information that might be helpful just to complete the picture. Yeah, okay, all right, thank you.
Will do.
Just for the record in my notes,
yes.
Chair.
If you don't come back to me with it, it won't be a big deal. But if you are able to come back with it,
and
it's
the
fine.
Information
or
being?
The information being, what would be the lifespan on average of those companies that were created for basically corruption purposes that would be liquidated later? Thank you.
I have to ensure homework is properly done.
Thank you.
You then deal in paragraph 13.5, Mr. Agrizzi, with another manner in which cash could be generated for the purposes of bribery, as you've described in your evidence in the past 2 days. Would you relate to the Chair how this scheme worked, and please take it step by step.
Yes, Chair. There was another way that the cash was withdrawn, and that was via a contractor called Rikele Construction, which is owned by a gentleman by the name of Rian Hoeksma. Hoeksma had a very good relationship with a wholesale liquor outlet in Randfontein that does a lot of cash transactions, and obviously they had a lot of cash and it cost money to deposit cash, so they'd rather give it away, or not give it away, but give it to someone else and receive a EFT for it. It's also much safer in today's times. So what would happen is that
EFT,
electronic fund transfer, so through the bank. Does that clarify that?
yes. I'm sorry I interrupted you and your train of thought, but take your time.
No problem. So what would happen is that this company called Jumbo Liquor would hand the funds over to Mr. Hoeksma, and at the same time also do an invoice to BOSASA for alcohol. All right? This alcohol was not purchased. There was no alcohol whatsoever, not even communion wine, Chair. So it was never purchased. It was just cash.
And was never delivered.
It was never delivered. It was just specified as an invoice, and who would check that the invoice would be delivered? Nobody would check. So the cash was transferred, and the amount of the invoice was paid and given in cash instead of the communion wine or the alcohol or the Coca-Cola or whatever.
So let's take it step by step because the scheme can be quite confusing unless one follows it step by step.
So if I can explain it to you, I would put an order for, I'm just saying I would. I never did the orders.
Yeah.
They would put in an order for 4 million rand. Over a weekend, Jumbo Liquor wholesalers would do 4 million rand.
And then, I'm sorry, do I understand correctly? Are you saying that the order, I mean, you have told me that there would be no liquor delivered. The order would be for liquor to the amount of 4 million rand?
Correct.
Okay. Yes, okay, all right, continue. So I just wanted to understand that part because I would imagine it would catch anybody's eye, just the mere fact that it's liquor and it's for so much. But you will continue, you may continue.
Obviously the amount was split over time, so maybe using 4 million rand is not the right, maybe let's use 600.
It's not.
It wasn't a 4 million amount.
I'm
just giving the amount.
But
it would be, say, 1 million or 1.2 million at a time. But over a week or over 2 weeks, it would come to 4 or 5 million.
That's
from the same supplier.
That's still quite high, I would imagine, yeah.
But as long as the invoices were in sequence and it didn't highlight any concerns from anybody. So what would happen is the order would be sent, they would collect up the cash, and when it was ready to be delivered, there would be a phone call and payment of an EFT would transfer. Now, there were interesting
phone call from who to whom?
Well, it would be, I can't recall if it was Jacques van Zyl and Rian Hoeksma, or if it was Andries van Tonde and Rian Hoeksma. But they would normally, the standard practice would be they phone a week during the week and say, Gavin Watson needs X amount of cash, and they would then arrange it.
Yes.
So what would happen then is that it would be delivered to the offices, and that would be the payment, in lieu of the not delivering stock, they would deliver the cash for it. And because of this, the agent, who in this case was Rian Hoeksma, would get between 5% and 7.5% of the fee.
So just to make sure I understand, you are saying that it would happen that various orders for liquor, as it would appear, were made by BOSASA to Jumbo Liquor wholesalers, and that the amount could be 1 million, could for any particular order could be another amount, but over a week it could easily be about 4 million. Is that right? And more or less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe a week or 2 weeks.
Maybe a week or 2 weeks, yes. And then you say that one, no liquor would be delivered.
No.
Two, cash would then be made available at a certain stage that would correspond with the invoice.
Correct.
And that cash would be paid to somebody from a Jumbo Liquor Wholesalers or to Mr. Watson. Who would it be given to in terms of the procedure?
So what would happen is the cash would be delivered and it would follow exactly the same process of going into the first vault and then being transferred to Mr. Watson's vault.
Or the cash never physically left BOSASA to go to a Jumbo Liquor Wholesalers.
Now, what would happen is they would transfer via electronic
via
fee to pay for the invoice.
Oh, okay, yes.
And then the invoice would be delivered in cash to BOSASA.
Oh, okay, all right.
Clarify.
Yeah, and then you say there would be a person from Jumbo Liquor Wholesalers who would then get, in effect, some commission.
Yes.
Yeah, and the commission would be about 5% or 7.5% according to your statement, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to clarify.
Yes.
The
commission went to Rian Hoeksma because he was the agent for Jumbo Liquor.
Yes.
So he would get the 5 to 7%.
Okay. No, thank you.
Let's just summarize
Yes.
public consumption in another way, because this scheme is difficult to follow. BOSASA orders liquor for R1 million by way of example from the wholesaler.
Correct.
The wholesaler then invoices BOSASA
That is correct.
in the sum of R1 million, and by EFT transfer, R1 million in actual money is paid to the liquor wholesaler.
That is correct, Chair.
That's one box of transactions.
That's correct.
Now, the liquor wholesaler has not delivered any liquor pursuant to that order,
That's
but
right.
it's now sitting with R1 million by EFT transfer.
That's correct, Chair.
It has cash, and so it provides this cash to the agent.
That's correct.
The agent takes his cut and delivers the balance to BOSASA.
That is correct, Chair.
And so what one has on the one hand is a series of orders, invoices, and EFT payments for the records, and on the other hand, one has cash movement on the other.
That is correct, Chair.
Thank you.
I just need to add, Chair, there's one missing link.
Yes.
The link is the invoice is put through as operational expenses and expensed.
Yes.
So it becomes tax deductible.
Oh, okay.
In paragraph 13.6, Mr. Agrizzi, you talk about cash drawings for cash checks and how these are reflected on the bank statements. What was the position initially, or when these schemes first started being implemented?
The problem when the initial cash checks were drawn up is that these were reflected on the bank statements as cash drawings, because a cash check is cash drawings, so it looked very suspicious. A concern was raised by the auditors, and the explanation was given to the auditors that the payments that were being made were too small, and these were start-up companies that BOSASA had to accommodate. So they would make cash payments to them.
You say that the payments were being made were too small. You mean they were being made to STO, small and startup companies.
Correct.
The scheme the scheme means that in the case of jumbo liquor wholesalers, in terms of their books, they would be shown to have received certain amounts of money for liquor
Yes.
that they sold when in fact there was no liquor that they sold.
Yes.
Thank you.
Then in paragraph 13.7 at the bottom of page 26, you refer to another method utilized by BOSASA to generate cash. Again, step by step, if you will, would you tell the Chair what happened here?
This is actually a very sad story, Chair. Because at one stage, the employees, I'm not going to read off my statement, I know it so well. At one stage, the employees were having major problems because they were losing family members through death, natural death. And we then decided that we needed to help the employees, and we bought what was called a Metropolitan Death Benefit Fund, which basically covers employees in the event of death with, I think it was 20,000 Rand or 10,000 Rand. If a main member died, if a child died, it was maybe a little bit less, and if a mother or a father died, it would be a little bit less. So it was a scheme that I implemented to try and assist. But then what happened was, the death certificates are always delayed. So we would then issue an advance to the person instead of waiting for Metropolitan to actually issue a check and verify that the person has got a legitimate death certificate and all that. So what happened was then a second request was made. So if a family member died, they would get two checks. So they would get the Metropolitan check, and then they would get a cash check. But they never actually received the cash check. The cash check was used to draw cash out the bank for bribes and corruption. So the second check that was written out was not ever given to the family, but it was used to pay bribes and to raise cash to be able to do that. So if anybody was questioned, then it would be clearly said to them that no, the company contributed because it had all the supporting documentation. So we decided to contribute a double check to the person, and that's how we passed off.
So, but those two checks remained checks from BOSASA as opposed from Metropolitan.
Correct.
So when the Metropolitan one came, it would just refund BOSASA, is that right?
Correct.
Yes, but the point of what was happening is that two checks were made, and the books would reflect that they all went to the employee or his family, but actually only one went there. Is that right?
You've hit the nail on the head, Chair.
Thank you. The other one was used for briberies.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Were records of these transactions kept?
Look, the records of the transactions are all kept because these are normal, they appear as normal transactions. And at one stage, the estimated monthly total was about 300,000 Rand. I mean, we were having a lot of deaths. We had people in security and ill people. So it was quite high at 1 month, I remember specifically.
What was BOSASA's total number of employees at any one stage, or maybe towards the end of your time there, more or less?
Look, I'm not too sure of what it is now, but at one stage, at the peak, especially with all the security contracts with the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, with the Post Office and that, it was up to about 6,000 people.
Oh, okay.
I do not have a clue of what it is at now.
Yeah, okay.
But it's considerably lower, I believe.
Okay.
Thank you. Just to summarize once again, Mr. Agrizzi, in relation to the death benefits issue, there were two really separate transactions. One, when a family member died, the company BOSASA would give an advance of the amount covered by the death benefit and later recover this money from Metropolitan.
That is correct, Chair.
The other transaction was to say to the, well, not to say to the employee, but was to record in your books a cash donation to the family arising out of the circumstances of the death of the family member, but not to give that cash when that cash was drawn to the family member or to the family, but rather keep it for the purpose of generating cash for bribes.
That is correct, Chair.
By the time you left BOSASA, was that still happening, or had that terminated?
I cannot recall, Chair. I didn't want to even know about this. I didn't even want to sign off these death requests, of these death benefits at one stage. So I think people averted from coming to me. So the last time I recall signing them was in June 2016. So I cannot say.
So it was still, happening at that time?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, all right. Thank you.
I don't want you to deal at this stage with 13.8 of your statement, Mr. Agrizzi. We'll deal with it later when and if appropriate. But can we go then to paragraph 13.9? Before we do so, this death benefit scheme, and particularly the second transaction where a donation would be made for which ostensibly but not in reality cash was withdrawn from your accounts and given, or BOSASA accounts, and given to the employee's family. Did the employees know about this?
No, they did not.
Probably not. Then let's go to paragraph 13.9. You say in that paragraph that you're able to estimate the amount of cash that was drawn or generated over a period of time, and you refer to a monthly period here. Would you relate these calculations and their implications for income tax to the Chair, please? And you deal with that in paragraph 13.9 and 13.10 of your affidavit.
Chair, I'd like to clarify, I'm not an accountant.
Yes.
Okay, and
You'll just do the best you can.
I can just give information.
Yes.
And this is where it gets concerning, is that when you look at this done by a simple calculation, it is quite frightening.
Sorry, Chair, it is, I'm told, quarter past 11, perhaps before we venture into this accounting sphere, be it on an abbreviated basis. Perhaps the short adjournment should be taken.
Okay, we'll take the short adjournment, tea break, and we'll resume at 11:30. Then we adjourn.
Live from Park. Well, there you have it. We're coming out from Parktown, the second day of evidence for the former Chief Operations Officer of BOSASA, Angelo Agrizzi.
Yeah. At the very onset, he seemed determined to continue despite these security concerns, and saying that, he wants the nation to know what he knows, basically. So, and they were talking at the very start about the safe and how it was filled weekly. Spoke about the 70,000 rand that was found in a refuse bag.
I imagine a lot of our viewers were not very pleased about that, especially it being January.
Yeah, January. Also going on to speak about how payments were made to people, and spoke about the use of companies in order to filter these payments, and talking about these elaborate schemes that were used and
to generate invoices that didn't necessarily exist.
Yeah, so
in order to just keep the flow going.
One of them was involving this liquor company, and so various orders, as I put it down, you probably can help me better with this, various orders were made for liquor was made as it appears, and then one no liquor was delivered, but cash would then be made available that would correspond to this invoice. So that
he was
one of
saying
the
it's an
schemes.
agreement that they had with Rian Hoeksman, who was an employee at Jumbo Liquor, and it was essentially a way to create movement for the cash that would not be detectable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And towards the end, speaking about a so-called funeral scheme or a death scheme that was in play as well?
I think this is when the judge or Advocate Pretorius were going through the different ways and means that they were using to make sure that this money that should not be detected.
Yeah.
As you were saying, they were essentially running a bank from their premises.
So very interesting indeed, these schemes. It's sometimes a bit difficult to follow, so we're listening very carefully.
I think that's why they're making sure to look into the details. You can see how Advocate Pretorius goes back every now and again to say we need to clarify this point. But as Agrizzi said in the beginning, that after his coma, he decided that he was going to just say everything.
You're on the money on that one.
That's where he is.
Mind the pun. Okay, we're going to take a quick break.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Yes, Mr. Pretorius.
We were, Mr. Agrizzi, at paragraph 13.9 of your statement, and you were about to relate to the chair the calculations of monies, cash monies, referred to in paragraph 13.9 and 13.10.
Correct. Chair, if I can take you through a very rough calculation.
Yes.
Because what you've got to consider, as I said, I'm under oath and I don't want to be quoted and give the wrong figures. So what I'd like to just explain is that because these costs went through as operational expenses, they would dilute your profit margins when you reconcile your books at the end of the day. And obviously company tax would be affected. So in effect, it was defrauding the revenue services.
Yeah.
So if you just calculate, if you take 4 million rand in cash over 12 months, and not just 9 years, it comes to about 432 million rand. Of that 432 million rand, which was absorbed into cost of sales, in effect, company tax at 28%, gives you 120,960,000 rand tax evasion. Now, at this stage, I can't give a final figure. They would need to do a full audit on this, and I would gladly assist in the audit process of SARS or the Hawks or the SAPS or whoever it might be.
Yeah, okay.
But for present purposes and simply put, in large amount, the payment of cash bribes was accounted for as company expenses to the receiver of revenue.
Correct.
In paragraph 13.12, Mr. Agrizzi, you deal with another method used to generate cash. Would you relate that, please, to the chair?
What happened, Chair, if I may explain it in detail and give you the background, we were very involved and we had bought a company called F&R Pegisa, and it was a repair shop type company, and they had a fuel station in Belfast, in Witbank area. BOSASA would basically collect all the cash that was in the forecourt that motorists would use to pay for fuel, and BOSASA would then reimburse the fuel station and basically run an account. So run an account for the cash that was taken and replace that with an EFT, and this was reflected in the expenses as well of BOSASA.
All right, so as far as the fuel station is concerned, it would receive money in cash.
Correct.
From the motorists.
Correct.
It would give that cash to BOSASA.
Correct.
It would not be out of pocket because it would be reimbursed.
That's correct.
By BOSASA by way of EFT transfer.
That's correct.
So instead of having cash, it had money accounted for through an EFT transfer.
That's correct.
But for its troubles, BOSASA then had cash.
Correct. I'll just recall the name of the person that was responsible on a daily basis to go and
Yes.
fetch it, and I'll make a note of it and give it to the Commission.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Now, you've told the Chair that the details of these transactions, the calculation or the calculation of the value of these transactions, the people involved, is a matter of detail, and in relation to any investigation that might arise, you're willing to cooperate.
Most definitely, Chair.
But from your own knowledge, from your rising out of your duties at BOSASA, and given your position in BOSASA when these transactions were effected, you have personal knowledge of these transactions having taken place.
I do, most definitely.
All right.
If I can add, Chair?
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot of, because of time, we did not have time to put everything in. You know, there's a whole
Yes.
lot more that'll come out as time goes on.
Yeah, well, I must just say that I have seen in parts of your statement, your affidavit that is before me, where you have indicated that you can give more details and more information. I have no doubt that the legal team and investigators of the Commission will pursue that to see what can be made out of that information. So all information that you may have that is relevant to what we are doing, we want to know. Thank you.
As I understand it, I'm sorry, did I interrupt an answer, Mr. Agrizzi? As I understand it, Mr. Agrizzi, you have a large amount of documentation.
I have given the documentation, that is correct. It is in safekeeping, it was subpoenaed, and it is with the Commission at the moment.
In fact, boxes of documents,
That's correct.
as well as electronic information.
With all the hard drives, yes.
Thank you very much.
All right,
Thank you very
paragraph 13.4, Mr. Agrizzi, contains another method used by BOSASA to generate cash. Again, you talk about it at a general level. Would you describe to the Chair the method referred to here?
Chair, one of the mechanisms used was to, if a client approached, especially with the youth centres, if they approached for assistance, as they put it, with elections or with electioneering, they would approach us, and normally the youth centre management would come to me and say, look, person X has approached us and they need X amount. And they're prepared to pay for software or a fence or whatever that needs to be provided. So basically, we would supply software programs. Now, these software programs actually didn't cost anything because they'd been done already. So it would be invoiced as a software program, and let's just say, for example, the program would be invoiced out properly as the relevant documentation.
To the youth centre.
From the youth centre to the client. The client would arrange to sign it off, and the client, whoever signed it off, and the person that requested the money, the part of the monies would be retained by BOSASA and the youth centre. The other part would be paid in cash to the official. Now, a prime example of this is in the Northwest Province. And I do, if I recall correctly, I do know that there was an investigation at one time, but I wasn't privy to it at all.
Can you say when this would have occurred?
This occurred about 5 years ago.
You refer to electioneering. Did I hear correctly?
Correct.
Yeah. Are you talking about certain elections in certain parties, political parties. I talk about elections, country elections like we are going to have and like we had in 2014, or what are you talking about?
I think these are more regional elections. So it come
That
from
would relate to
regional-
a particular party, or?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay. And would this happen with a particular political party, or would it happen with different political parties?
No, it was one specific political party, Chair.
And it happened on a particular occasion, not it happened over time?
I think it happened quite often over time,
Yes.
and I'm sure it's no secret that there was a reason for that, to support that specific funding of elections and that type of thing.
Well, is that something that's still coming up, or is
No,
that?
Perhaps what we should do, Chair, is test the extent of the witness's knowledge,
Yeah. Okay. Do
the
you want?
remoteness or directness of the knowledge.
Yeah. Do you want to do that?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
But if I may just precede that with understanding the scheme and where the various
Yes.
spheres of influence would lie. To describe the process of cash generation first, and we'll come to this issue afterwards. A youth development centre
Yes.
being administered and run by BOSASA,
Yes.
in fact owned by BOSASA.
In one instance, it is owned, the facility, and that is the Mohali Youth Centre, Chair.
Okay. They say to BOSASA, and this is all arranged, of course, we need a software program.
Correct, Chair.
And BOSASA then supplies a software program.
Correct.
This has either been costed in the expenses already, or it's provided at no cost to BOSASA.
That is correct.
The Youth Development Centre, do I understand it, then pays BOSASA for the provision of that service?
That's not correct. What happens is the Department of Social Services and the relevant person responsible there would pay BOSASA for the software.
And it's the, yes, I understand, it's the department responsible for the provision of that service ultimately through BOSASA.
Correct.
It would then pay the amount to BOSASA.
That's correct. It would be
And
paid.
the department, I think you said, of social services you are talking about, is it the government department of social services, or is it some unit or department in a company?
It is the South African or the Northwest or the Cape Town Department of Social Services and Development.
Okay, thank you.
So this money is paid and received by BOSASA,
That is correct.
ultimately for no value.
That is correct.
Part of the money, I understand, would be retained by BOSASA,
That is correct.
and part would be paid to whom?
Would be paid to the individual that had requested the funding.
So this whole scheme or arrangement is in order to provide cash to someone else,
That's correct.
an official who requested cash.
That's correct.
Now, you've said that the reason or the underlying motive for the whole arrangement of the provision of cash was, as you described it, for elections.
That was the excuse given to me, Chair, by the people who worked at BOSASA Youth Development Centres.
So someone, either the official at the Youth Development Centre or someone else, initiates this transaction through a request to BOSASA.
That's correct, Chair.
And you say that the motive or the reason, therefore, you know, and that's what we're going to test now, is the funding for elections. How do you know that? Is this something that you know? Is it something that you can reliably testify to? or is it conjecture on your part?
It's definitely
You
not.
don't want to hear conjecture.
It's definitely not conjecture. I think, Chair, I've made it very clear that I will be totally frank, honest, and open. I will not conjure up anything. And I think that the important part with regards to what I was told and what was requested, I can confirm it, that it was Sivian Dlamini from BOSASA that requested that I attend a meeting at I'm giving you one example of the Northwest. I would attend a meeting at the stadium that was built in Rustenburg. I can't recall the name right now, but I attended a meeting there and the MEC was present with me. I cannot recall the name. At that meeting I was told it's for electioneering, and that's why I've made mention of it.
Would the MEC that you are talking about that was present, would it have been an MEC responsible to the extent that a provincial government might have this, I'm not sure, for social services, as you understood?
Chair, I don't have the best memory. My understanding was it was a lady and she was responsible for social development in the Northwest.
Okay, thank you.
Now, before you tell the Chair of the final destination of this money for elections, just tell the Chair on what you base such knowledge. You say there was a meeting.
Correct.
What did this meeting have to do with these monies generated at paragraph 13.14 of your statement?
That specific meeting that I attended, I was asked to attend. At that meeting, the request was made.
The request for cash?
Correct.
And it was made by whom?
I cannot recall the lady MEC's name, but what I can tell you is that Sivian Dlamini was present and he will recall the person's name because he ultimately handled the delivery as well.
So involved in this transaction was the person who requested it, an MEC, and Sivian Dlamini.
Correct.
All right. Let's take
Was Mr. Dlamini from the youth center of BOSASA or not?
He's, I believe, a director of BOSASA Youth Development Centers.
Oh, okay, thank you.
All right. Well, perhaps it is safe to ask the following question, Chair, and I'll be guided by you because ultimately you're in charge of the leading of evidence. I'm not passing the buck, Chair, but do you know whether Mr. Dlamini and the MEC that you've referred to had connections with any particular political party?
Yes, I do.
Yes. And what is the political party?
I wouldn't. Do I have to say it, Chair?
What is your answer to my question?
My answer to your question is it's the ruling party.
Thank you.
All right. Let's go to paragraph 13.15, please.
I don't know whether you have finished on this. Have you or haven't you?
Well, there's more detail in relation to the allegations in 13.14, in paragraph 13.15,
Okay.
but I've completed 13.14. Chair.
Okay, let me ask. Now, this transaction that you have just given evidence about,
Yes,
did
Chair.
you say it took place about 5 years ago, or are you not able to remember the year?
Chair, I'm sure the investigators can actually perhaps check.
Get the information,
that
yes.
information with the hotel.
Yes, okay.
Because I've used my credit card there, my company
Yes.
credit card.
Yes.
And they, please, if they can pull my company credit
Yes.
card
Yes.
history, they will see the hotel
Yes.
and where I actually
Yes.
was.
Okay. Now, the election, as I understand you, and you must just tell me if I misunderstood you, the election in connection with which this money was requested was to be in the Northwest, and your understanding was that it was a regional election, but when you say regional, I don't know whether you mean provincial or you mean something of less than a province or local government, or you are not sure.
I'm going to try and jog my memory
Yes.
and try and
Yeah.
remember. It seems to be coming back to me now. There's a couple of
Yeah.
stories around it that
Yeah.
I will jot down and then ask the
Yeah.
investigators to look
Yes.
into.
But in effect, was, as you understood the purpose of this money, was it to help somebody or a political party in their election campaign, or in his or her election campaign? Was that your understanding?
That was my understanding.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. In paragraph 13.15, Mr. Agrizzi, you deal with the Northwest Youth Development Facilities, and you refer to transactions happening on numerous occasions. Would you just describe what you're referring to in that paragraph for the Chair, please?
So, Chair, one of the ways that it started becoming very prevalent in the Northwest was that special pre-opening expenses were levied on youth centres. Now,
What is a
there's
pre-opening expense? Would you just describe it, please?
well, a pre-opening expense is normally when you get handed over a facility and you need to buy equipment, S&T, that type of thing. So you levy an opening expense to be able to afford that. Now, in certain cases, the costs of the fencing and security systems that were implemented were highly inflated. So the department paid much more, and the agreement was that the person negotiating these payments, Mr. Sivian Lamini, who was the director of the BOSASA Youth Development Centres, would actually sort out or pay the people.
When
I
you
would
say
merely-
to pay the people, would you be a bit more specific, please?
Well, I don't know who the actual people were, but Sivian Lamini would pay the responsible officials in the Department of Youth Development Centres, in government, in social services. So I would, what I did was I just waited until I saw that what they were telling me was true, that the company wasn't being defrauded, and that if they prepared an invoice for 2 million rand pre-opening expenses, I expected it to be paid before they paid anything out.
So once you had been reassured that BOSASA hadn't been defrauded, cash was paid out, someone else was defrauded. Is that right?
Yes, the department,
And-
government.
And that was the government department that had paid for non-existent expenditure or inflated costs for services provided.
Correct. We, the taxpayers, paid.
You receive the money and then you pay out cash, and by you I mean BOSASA.
Correct.
And is that the cash that you refer to in paragraph 13.16 and about which you've now testified, money required by, as you say here, individuals for elections?
That is correct.
So somebody within the relevant government department would have known the true nature of this transaction, is that correct?
That is correct.
So somebody within the relevant government department would be party to the payment of taxpayers' money to BOSASA for non-existent programs, and so that BOSASA could then pay the money or part of the money to somebody or a political party to support their election campaign. That's That's the bottom. That's what happened. What's happening?
Well, that's what we were told.
That's what.
That
Yes.
it was the political party.
Yes.
I just want to clarify one issue is that you must remember that there was a software system that was developed. It was ready. It was developed. It's as good as if I go to your car and I take out your navigation disc and I sell it back to you. That's basically what it was. The car comes with navigation. Why on earth would you now charge for a navigation disc? So when I mean something wasn't delivered, was there was no additional expense to getting that delivered there. You were sold the product and you were overcharged for the product, in effect.
Well, what I want to try and understand is whether the person or persons from the relevant government department who would authorize the payment of money to BOSASA for this transaction, whether they knew or are likely to have known that really there's nothing to pay for. It's just to facilitate a certain transaction. You might not be able to answer that.
I can't answer that. I don't know what they were thinking.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
All right. Let's digress for a moment to deal with the issues in paragraph 13.
I'm sorry. Of course, if you did what you just said, if you were to do in my car, take out a navigator and later put it back, if I paid, I would know that I'm not getting any value.
Sorry to use that kind of example,
Yeah,
but that's the truth.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
Well, except that the Youth Development Centre might report to the official concerned that value had been received.
Well,
Because there was a disguised transaction, a request for software or a...
and the software would be there if you wanted to see it. So, Chair, it was there. So if the auditors came to check on it, software is something that you cannot quantify the value of.
So there is room that, excuse me, there is a room that somebody's explanation might be, I thought we got value, I thought we were paying for something that's of value, but maybe it turns out I was mistaken or something.
Correct.
Okay.
Can we deal, Mr. Agrizzi, with the issues you raise in paragraph 13.17 and 13.18? And in essence, what you deal with here is why it would be difficult for any audit or anyone looking at the books of the company to recognize that there was something amiss. And you talk here about the cash drawings in the books of the company related to the turnover or the amounts in the books of BOSASA as a whole. So would you just deal, please, with the issues raised in paragraph 13.17 and 13.18?
Well, Chair, I've alluded to some of the most prevalent mechanisms of handling cash.
We'll do more.
There are some more coming through, but the most important thing was these were always reflected as run-of-the-mill costs. So if you look at the percentage in relation to turnover, it's really a drop in the ocean. Because what happens is if you take, for instance, the 4.5 million rand that is required out of one contract, let's take the average purchases and salaries of BOSASA and amounted to, say, that's excluding, sorry, it should be excluding salaries and wages, would amount to 88 million rand per month. Now, if you take 4.5 million rand and divide that just into 88 million rand, it's a minuscule amount, it's 5.5%. Now, bearing in mind that the profit margins at BOSASA are exceptionally high, industry related, if you compare it to industry, it's unique. we are always able to make exceptionally good profits as a company. And so if you look at it in the profit terms, your profits would still reflect 28 to 35% net profit before tax, even after you have paid out 4.5 million rand through the books. Why would an auditor query that? It's a well-run business. So in actual fact, if I can just go back there, the profit should have reflected, say, 32 or 33 or 34%, but they were reflecting 28 to 32%. So the auditors were amazed, they were happy, and anybody would be happy as a shareholder as well with that kind of return on investment. So it didn't raise eyebrows at all. And the main reason for this is because of the good pricing we were able to negotiate with, for instance, correctional services, the extensions we were able to get. So that facilitated that to a large degree. And then in November, December, when it was Christmas shopping time, and obviously you'd use more cash because more cash would be requested by Gavin Watson, the 2 or 3% fluctuation there would really be explained as a public holiday or expenses over a public holiday. So the whole idea was to show the auditors and the submission of tenders, the bid adjudication committees, if they looked at our numbers and they did an analysis, was to show a smooth graph. You see, if it was consistent every month, it was fine. But as soon as you have a spike, that's what it attracted attention. Now, the way we managed it would be very, very difficult for an auditor, even a forensic auditor, to actually pick it up unless you knew the system itself.
You refer to public holiday costs over the December period. What is a public holiday cost?
Public holiday costs were your overtime costs, really. But what people forget as well is that over public holidays you have certain savings. So people don't do as many visits and all that. So it actually really balances out, Chair. What happens is that if you have a query on why did your costs cover up over December by 3%, so your margins and your profit dropped down to 25% where they should be 28%, the argument would quite simply be given, well, it was public holidays, we spoilt the people, we gave them braai packs, that type of thing. Could be easily explained.
All right. And just formally, Mr. Agrizzi, you say the word in the first line of paragraph 13.18, including should read excluding.
I would like to verify that because, I haven't been there for so many years, but my recollection is that that is excluding.
All right. Well, we'll have a look at that during an adjournment and correct if necessary.
Correct.
Mr. Pretorius, did we cover when Mr. Agrizzi was dealing with this transaction that entailed him going to a stadium in Northwest, did we cover the question of what amount was involved? I don't seem to have picked that up. If we haven't, maybe he can assist us in that transaction.
Yes. I'll deal with it. Thank you, Chair. In paragraph 13.14 and 13.15, as well as 13.16, you describe a general method of generating cash.
Yes.
And as you say, we'll deal with specific examples in due course. But for the present, you spoke of one transaction that was discussed at a meeting in the Northwest to which you referred, and you've given detail to the Chair. Can you estimate the value of that particular transaction?
Chair, the transaction, if I recall, or try and recall correctly, was about 3.4 million rand.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
If I can clarify as well, of the 3.4 million rand, I think the cash paid out to the individual was about 1.8 million.
Okay, thank you.
I can't recall the exact number.
Thank you.
Let's move on then to paragraph 14 of your statement and affidavit. The Chair will recall reference to the Lindela repatriation facility. this appears to be, from your statement, another method of cash generation. Would you describe that, please, to the Chair?
Chair, we at one stage had a very close community at Lindela. So nobody could really go out and buy out and that. And one thing about undocumented migrants is they retain their money and they keep their money. So at any one stage, you would have up to 800 to a million rand in safekeeping for them. But the one thing that they do want to do is to buy additional foods and groceries at the canteens, which we managed and ran as well. So they would like to spend cash for that. Now, these were very well priced comparatively and that, but the average takings would be about 300,000, and it went up. It
Per what period?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Sorry, you say the average takings were 300,000 rand?
Correct. They
what
were well
period?
over 300, 350, sometimes even 400,000 rand.
Per day, month, year? Per month?
Per month, yes. All right, but this wouldn't all be reflected as revenue. So what would happen is the grocery items would be expensed, the cost of sales, in the cost of sales, and the cash would be taken over to Gavin Watson's safe, with a small amount being declared as revenue, maybe 10 or 15% of the actual. So that was one way of generating cash. It wasn't a big way. This only happened in early 2000, and then the cash requirements became much greater with the correctional services contracts and all the other contracts.
Okay,
the other method was the use of these prepaid cell phones. So detainees were purposefully not allowed to take their cell phones into the facility, and they would have to use cell phones that were fixed lines that were in a store kind of pay-as-you-go type environment where they could then phone from there.
Again, I'm sorry, Chair.
Yeah, no, you may continue. Thank you.
Again, just to summarize, at the Lindela repatriation facility administered by BOSASA,
Correct.
there would at any one time be several thousand people resident there or detained there. They would make cash payments to tuck shops and canteens or to BOSASA for the use of cell phones at the facility. That cash would be retained and delivered to BOSASA for its use.
Correct, Chair.
The cost of those sales, for example, the cell phone costs and the canteen costs of the food and groceries there, was nevertheless expensed in the books of BOSASA as an operational expense.
That is correct, Chair.
All right. Can we move on then to cash bars and canteens? A similar method of cash generation is described here. Would you tell the Chair about it, please?
Chair, if I may just give you the history. We used to manage numerous mining hostel in the mining hostel days. And we would have bars and canteens there, which were actually very lucrative. And only a certain amount of those cash takings would actually be declared for revenue purposes. Exactly the same as Lindela, this would be expensed through the company, and the money would be collected. As a matter of fact, we had a special CIT team, they were called Cash in Transit team, that would go and collect the monies from the various facilities and then bring it back to Gavin's vault. And there was one person allocated to count it and to put it in the safe and administrate it.
Right, and that cash was used for the purposes you say here that you've described to the Chair previously in your evidence. Is that correct?
Correct.
Then, for how long did this practice in relation to the hostels continue? Or did it at a time cease, and why?
Well, Chair, this practice dwindled in 2003, 2004, I think it was, when BOSASA sold off the mining contracts. It might have been 2002, 2003. I'm not 100% sure. But we sold off the mining contracts at that stage to a gentleman by the name of Greg Lake and Allen, and that was with Equality Foods. So they sold it off, and he took over those contracts. It happened up until then.
You say in paragraph 16.1, under the head cash drawings, that during the period 2003 to 2004,
Yes.
and as a result of the fact that the bars and canteens used to generate cash had been sold as part of the sale of the mining contracts, as you've just now referred to, other arrangements had to be made to sustain cash income. And then you describe in paragraph 16.2 and following that further method. Will you tell the Chair about that, please?
Well, as a result of the cash bars and the canteens and that being sold off as part of the mining contracts, special arrangements were then made to sustain the cash income to be able to use to pay out. And that is when, and we mentioned it earlier, we actually resorted to writing out casual wages, because at that time there was also a lot of building work taking place. I was in the process of renovating the offices and extending and doing quite a lot of building work. So the people in accounts took advantage of that and processed casual wages through there and issued out cash checks. And obviously, no work was done for the amount. If there were 10 people working, 100 people would be invoiced out as casual workers.
So were these ghost workers?
Yes.
And in paragraph 16.3, you say that one method of disguising, I presume you mean here, the expense was to allocate them to certain facilities under construction. Would you tell the Chair about that, please?
Well, there were two facilities at the time, and one of them was being redeveloped for a halfway house for child awaiting children. The other one was being redeveloped for a reintegration facility. And basically, there was a lot of work that took place there. So we would invoice out, or not invoice out, but we'd pay casual wages to ghost workers out there for those facilities. And at that stage, it could be attributed to the work that was actually being done there by the builders as well. So the chances are that it would be picked up by the revenue services was very, very slim. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Agrizzi. In paragraph 16.4 then, you go on to talk of risks, and please tell the Chair about what occurred here that you're relating to. The Chair.
Chair, I was a bit concerned about the practice because it was extremely risky. I knew what they were doing, I knew how they were doing it, and I was concerned. So specifically on one hand, why I was concerned was because there was a junior lady that would go and do it with one of the gentlemen. And why I was concerned was because people are killed for much less money. So how do you on earth allow a lady to transport or carry this amount of money around? So I went with them to see now, how do they do it? So I could understand it for myself. And so they would make up 3 checks, and they would go to the bank, phone the bank first and say, look, we're coming. They go to the bulk teller. And so I wanted to understand the process that was being followed to draw the cash as well.
Sorry, if I may just interrupt you. These 3 checks ostensibly were for wages.
Correct. Correct. So the total I went with them was 720,000 Rand, which they'd have to pack in a bag, and they would actually carry out the bag out of the bank. I thought it was ridiculous, and eventually I asked them to stop it because it was just too dangerous.
The practice of generating cash through the ostensible payment of wages to workers who didn't actually exist, ghost workers, was that stopped at some stage?
I think it was circa 2003, Chair, that the Department of Labour brought in a ruling that workmen's compensation, UIF, will be paid even for casual labour. I can't remember the exact date, but I do remember that, and because of that, we stopped it immediately, because you would have to pay the UIF on top of the salary and wage as well, and you're paying to a fictitious person.
All right. So because the law required the keeping of records, even where casual labour had to be paid in
Correct.
cash, would expose BOSASA to risk.
Correct.
Right. I just want to check something with you, please. You say in paragraph 15.2 that the practice of taking cash from hostels, canteens, and bars dwindled in 2003 and 2004. Do you see that? You say that in paragraph 15.2.
Correct, I do.
You say then that special arrangements had to be made, presumably you mean after that, for a new scheme to generate cash.
Correct.
You then talk about this ghost worker scheme.
That is right.
But then you say that in paragraph 17.1, the Department of Labour made the payment of casual wages subject to all types of scrutiny in 2003. So I'm just not sure of the casual wages system replacing the other system. What is the time sequence of these schemes? And if you could just try and tell the Chair when each scheme more or less was prevalent.
Okay, so up until 2002, we would have the occasional ghost workers. Yes, we would. I mean, that we had. But most importantly was we had sold off the bars and canteens, and the only other way to get cash was through casual wages. But then what happened was UIF kicked in, and we decided then we cannot continue with that. And that's why it was stopped with regards to casual. And also, bear in mind that now we were talking getting up to 2004 when correctional services would need cash. And that was a hungry animal to feed every month. So, and that's why we then changed systems and brought in new systems.
So this casual wage scheme for the generation of cash, the ghost worker casual wage scheme, for how long did that last?
I can't even remember exactly.
Yes, we may look at the dates finally at the end of your evidence.
Would you be able to say whether it was there for most of your time at BOSASA or for less than half the time you were there?
No, less than half the time. Are you talking about, sorry, I'm not understanding what Advocate Pretorius is wanting me to say.
I think he's still on casual wages, is that right?
Yes. No, you see, if one looks at page 31 and 32, and I'll try and be brief on this because it possibly could be cleared up later, you say that the ghost worker scheme was generated after 2003 and 2004.
Correct.
But you say it was stopped as a result of what the Department of Labour did in 2003.
Correct.
So if it started after 2003 and 2004, but ended when the Department of Labour issued its directions or regulations in 2003, the times don't really make sense.
I must be very frank with you, Chair, is that it's a long time ago. It's 15 years, 16 years ago. I can't remember exactly, and I didn't write my affidavit in terms of making sure that these dates, I didn't want to collude anything.
Yes,
I had a limited time, I wrote the affidavit, so there will be errors with dates, but the point is, this is how it happened.
But insofar as the dates are indicative at least of general periods, the casual wages ghost worker scheme can't have lasted for very long, as I understand your evidence.
No, for a short time, isn't it?
No, it was
2003, 2004.
I think it was about 6 months or a year. I can't remember exactly.
All right.
The
that
person,
makes more sense.
See, Chair, I didn't actually do this.
Yeah.
I'm reporting on it because I know about it.
Yes.
But I didn't actually physically do it. So the
Yes.
person that is going to report on it,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you will call him as a witness, will be able to give the detail on it.
Yes. But maybe it would suffice if you are able to say something like, I'm not sure, but it may have gone on for about 6 months or a year or 2 years or 5
Yes.
years. So what would be your estimate in terms of that?
6 months.
About 6 months.
Correct.
Early in the 2000s, mid 2000s.
Early in
Thereabout.
2000.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
To
That
be
should
fair
be
to
enough.
you, Mr. Agrizzi, in paragraph 16.1, you do say in relation to this particular ghost worker issue that it occurred, I assume it's what you mean here in paragraph 16.1, during the period 2003 and 2004.
Correct.
Can we move then to the heading equal trade in paragraph 18 of your statement? You refer back in paragraph 18.1 to the method of generating cash through the purchase of liquor from jumbo wholesalers. And the Chair questioned you about the quantities of liquor involved. Do you recall that exchange?
I do recall it.
All right. Would you just tell the Chair then of the scheme developed in paragraph 18.1 and why it was developed?
Eventually, Chair, if I may respond, the large amounts of cash via jumbo just were becoming somewhat obvious to the accounting principals and the accounting general staff, because the general staff themselves would say, well, we know there's one person that enjoys expensive whiskey in the company, but there's no ways he can drink this amount of whiskey. So anybody with a little bit of experience would see that it's impossible. This is not true. So further than the fact that we didn't actually use liquor apart from the occasional grape juice for communion, and we didn't need a relationship with jumbo because this was now starting to become a concern. So hence Jacques van Zyl then approached me about changing the methodology. And they had thought through it as a team, as from the accounts team, and they approached me. And matter of the fact is I actually didn't want to get involved at first. I kind of shunned the idea because I just felt that, I was getting at a stage where I was getting a bit fed up of all of this. And I told him, I said to him, look, I don't want to really know. He approached Gavin Watson with the idea of utilizing an existing supplier that was supplying chicken, frozen chicken, portions to the relevant catering operations and on a national basis. So the whole idea and the concept was that Equal Trade also had other businesses which were cash generating. I believe some of them were in the cigarette trade, some of them in the alcohol trade, and some in the betting industry. So they then approached and they said, well, they want to run with it. They want to coordinate it because if they do it, then they know it's safe and it'll stand up to scrutiny. So I left it because I thought, well, you know what, if you guys are controlling it, you're accountants, you're the clever people, you'll be able to manage it. So I let them go ahead and do it. And also, Gavin, just, let them handle it completely. So one thing that Gavin Watson did say was that I would have to remunerate them in cash as a bonus to all of them. And we all know why. Because he needed to raise the living standard so that these people continue to be subservient and just continue to do the work. And so I would have to give them 10,000 Rand a month. And those were Jacques van Zyl, Corinne Dobert, Rika Hundemark, and the Chief Accountant, Carlos Bonifacio.
If you would just pause there a moment, please.
Yes, we can.
How many catering operations approximately did BOSASA have nationally at that time? Can you say?
If I remember correctly, it was, I think, 37.
And does that mean that the volume of poultry that would be dealt with by BOSASA was substantial?
It would be, and I stand to correction, but I think I'm pretty accurate, it would probably be in the region of about 210 tons of poultry a month.
And you say in paragraph 18.2 that you made certain payments on the instruction of Gavin Watson. You do say, and you have just said to the chair, that you weren't too enthusiastic, to put it at its lowest, about this particular transaction.
Yes, I was.
But it seems clear from your evidence that on the instruction of Gavin Watson, you did pay the persons who implemented the scheme money in order to buy their loyalty to BOSASA and the scheme.
That is correct. If I can clarify why I wasn't happy about it, well,
Yes.
I allowed it because myself and Greg Lake and Alan had worked previously together, and I found him to be, a little bit untrustworthy, and I just wasn't comfortable. But I said that's why I said they have to control it.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So, but despite your discomfort, you did make the payments to facilitate the scheme
Yes,
and to reward those implementing the scheme.
correct.
In paragraph 18.3, you refer to another payment. What payment is that?
In 18.3, there was one person who would have to manipulate the system, which is a Microsoft accounting system called Great Plains, and he would get 20,000 rand because he would have to manipulate the stock holdings and things like that behind the scenes so that it wouldn't be obvious to the auditors.
Right. He received 20,000 rand per month in relation to the execution of the scheme.
That is correct.
The extent of your personal knowledge in this regard, did you actually take part in the execution of this process? And if not, where does your knowledge come from?
My knowledge comes from running the business, and I would make sure that I knew every aspect of that business, and I was integrally involved. I'm a committed operations person, and I like to be on the floor involved with the people. So that's where I got a lot of my information from. And though I didn't order or arrange the cash, I was well aware of the process used and the payments made.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I made it a point of every aspect of the business I would know.
Paragraph 19, Mr. Agrizzi, you say briefly how the scheme worked. And you compare the standard process, the correct, lawful, proper process, with the system, fraudulent system that was actually implemented to generate this cash. In paragraph 19.1, you describe the standard process, the correct process, or the lawful process. Would you tell the chair what that is, briefly?
Chair, the correct process would be there would be a normal delivery of goods to a site. Let's use Westville Medium A as an example. So Westville Medium A, the supervisor there is Jonas, and the storeman there is Caiaphas. So Jonas and Caiaphas would work out what the requirements would be for the new system. Is this what you're wanting me to explain?
Well, you don't have to go into so much detail,
Okay.
And those names are fictitious names, I presume.
They actually are the names, if I
Do
recall.
you know the surnames?
I can't recall the surnames.
All right. In
it's
any event-
3 years ago.
There's a correctional facility, goods
Yes.
are ordered.
Yes. So they would write out a purchase order.
Yes.
They would send the purchase order to the supplier via fax or email, and it's a proper purchase order. And on the purchase order, they would specify the price according to the buying manual which had been issued to them. So there's two comparative things. There's the price and the buying manual. And both of those have to be looked at before they place an order. They would also have to do their planning for the week and say, well, we know we're going to use X amount of chicken. And how they would calculate that is by taking the specification on the spec sheet, which is, say, 200 grams of chicken, times it by 1,000 people, so they knew that they would have to order 200 kilograms of chicken to feed 1,000 people, 200-gram portions. That would be placed with the supplier would then deliver it. So let's say the supplier delivered on the 1st of December, the supplier would deliver, it would go into store. The storeroom manager would basically sign and stamp the order coming in, and the storeman would be countersigned by the unit leader, who would also sign and stamp that the units were delivered and that they were placed on the bin cards. The system would then be that they would capture that invoice, and that invoice would then be sent through to head office a week or two later for payment by the end of the month, or if the agreement was 30 days from statement, by the end of next month.
By BOSASA, payment by BOSASA.
By BOSASA.
Yes, if I may just summarize then.
Yes.
Goods would be ordered by correctional services facility.
Correct.
Those goods would be delivered and received.
Correct.
A comprehensive recordal system would record quantities.
Correct.
An invoice would then be generated, issued to BOSASA, and payment would be made.
Correct.
That is the proper system, how it should work.
Correct.
What does the fraudulent system involve?
The fraudulent system, Chair, was that an invoice would be sent to BOSASA. No purchase order. The invoice would be sent to BOSASA head office.
Just the invoice?
Just the invoice. And the head office would get the invoice and make payment. Isn't that nice?
Were any goods delivered or received?
No goods are delivered yet.
Either before or after?
No, not at all. What happened was the invoice was sent, and this is where the investigators need to look, because normally you would wait 30 days from statement. Yeah, you were prepaying invoices. The other thing is that the investigators need to understand that there were certain items that were on that invoice, and you're talking, 6 million a month, so you can imagine for yourself, there were certain items that reflect zero-rated, items that are never ever used in a prison, which were rice, beans, and there were various other non-zero-rated items that are not used in a prison. We don't feed beans, and we definitely don't feed rice in correctional centers. But because those were non-VAT items, they were utilized.
Yes, you've just left out one sentence, if I may then take it step by step. The fraudulent system, as I understand it, involves the generation and delivery of an invoice to BOSASA.
Correct.
BOSASA then pays this invoice by means of electronic transfer.
Correct.
No goods are delivered, and obviously no goods are received at the facility.
That is
It's
true.
an entirely fictitious transaction.
Totally
Correct?
fictitious.
After payment is made by way of EFT, does BOSASA receive any monies, and how does this happen? How does this happen?
Normally, what we had negotiated with all suppliers, including the same supplier, is that payment is 30 days ex-statement. So remember, you receive goods on the 1st of December, payment is only on the 30th of February, 25th or 26th of February, because it's January to get the invoices together, and then February, and then we make payment. So in the instance of these fraudulent invoices, they are not stamped, and they are prepaid, which is very strange.
All right, so you pay by means of EFT. BOSASA pays this fictitious invoice.
Correct.
Does it receive anything in return?
Cash.
From whom?
From Equality Foods. They would deliver the cash.
All right. Was there any deduction from the amount of the invoice?
There was a deduction. I cannot remember if it was 12 or if it was 15% as a commission that they would take as well.
And what particular company was involved in the example that you're giving to the chair?
Well, Equal Trade would get the cash from various sources. Some of them would include Tattersalls for horse racing, but I believe most of it was through cross-border liquor transactions and forex transactions. And the benefit for them as well was that they didn't have to bank the cash, and they could then move the EFT into company.
Was the principle used here basically the same principle that was used for transactions with jumbo wholesalers, liquor wholesalers?
Correct.
It was the same principle, just a change of entities involved in terms of the supplier in quotes. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
So to summarize, from the point of view of Equal Trade, they would receive an order, they would invoice fictitiously, they would invoice BOSASA, BOSASA would pay by EFT, and then Equal Trade would take its own cash and give it to EFT minus its commission.
That's correct.
Right. Do you have the full name of Equal Trade? Is it a Pty Limited company? Is it a business name? What is it?
It's Equal Trade Pty Ltd, as far as I can recall.
Right. And then you say these transactions required to avoid scrutiny by the revenue services, and one method used to avoid scrutiny was to include on these fictitious items that would be zero rated for VAT purposes.
Correct.
So there would be no necessity to pay VAT in respect of sales where beans, maize meal, oil and rice are concerned, for example.
That is
was your
correct.
earlier evidence.
That is correct.
Were the amounts more or less the same as the amounts that you were talking about in regard to jumbo liquor wholesalers?
That is correct.
Thank you.
And you say that one anomaly in the scheme, insofar as it involved VAT, is that the standard or the items reflected on the fictitious invoices were often, if not all, standard stock items in correctional services facilities or on their menu plan.
Well, a lot of these were not standard stock items, but that's where one of the errors were later on. So in terms to avoid SARS scrutiny, those are the items you can use that are non-vatable. So SARS, when they see a non-vatable invoice, they don't even bother, they just pass it on.
Yes. But the transaction could be traced because by investigators, for example, because, for example, if a prison didn't use beans and yet was paying for beans, there would be an anomaly there that would raise suspicion.
Correct. I would assist them in finding the errors and showing them where it's picked up.
You say in paragraph 19.4, however, comparing the standard process to the fraudulent process and looking at the detail of each and every transaction is a detailed and complex task.
Most definitely, if you don't know what you're looking for.
Yes. And you say in paragraph 19.4, but it can be done.
Can be done quite easily.
Yes. And you also say here that you are willing to assist in that investigation process in regard to the detail of the investigation.
Yes, I would.
We're going to move on to paragraph 20, but I, for the present, don't want you to mention any name of any entity. You can talk about AA Wholesalers and Mr. Fenter, but no one else. Okay? Until we feel it appropriate to do so.
Will do.
Would you then, with that word of caution, please describe the scheme referred to under this head?
Yes. I'll do as I'm told.
Yes.
as I've suggested.
There will be a time when the names can be, you can deal with the names. Yeah, okay.
Right. The original introduction to AA wholesalers was with Piet Venter, who was an accountant and a tax
Don't mention the
specialist.
name of the firm, please.
And I will not.
Thank you.
I said I would do as I'm told.
Yes, Mr. Agrizzi.
Yes, and basically the introduction was Piet Venter was with Andries van Tonder. We had a second meeting where Gavin Watson was present and Andries van Tonder, and we actually met at the facility in Lenasia. It's a lovely facility that has got a lot of fridges and mattresses and massive facility, and they do a lot of exporting of goods. At that stage, we wanted to buy a company that would produce a lot of cash. So it would have to be in the retail space and preferably FMCG. And we looked at this facility, and it was decided we could work with them, but that to do an acquisition on that side of the facility was just really not viable, because there was a major culture difference between the two. So the only potential work that we could work with them was we could work out how much cash they collected on a weekly basis, which Mr. Venter knew, and we could then offer them a check for goods purchased. These goods would be invoiced exactly the same as all the others, as mattresses, because they manufactured them, plastic chairs, Fulendela, dishes, Fulendela, that type of thing. So that's what the relationship with them was. Certain of the transactions were actually legitimate, and others were just inflated to ensure that the overpayments could come through to us as balances and could come to us at BOSASA as cash. So in all these schemes, one thing I must mention is that Gavin didn't want the directors to initially know that we were embarking on these schemes, and then later on they found out. So we'd embark on it, do it, and then the directors would be told, but not before. Does that cover your...
Yes, well, if I can just summarize, because we're going to move on to a new topic now. This particular scheme in paragraph 20.4, AA wholesalers would provide goods to BOSASA, goods which were used by BOSASA in its business.
There were very little.
Right. They would, however, over-invoice.
That's correct.
Charge you more than they actually provided.
So, Chair, if
More
they
than the
charged,
value of which they provided.
if they charged us for one mattress, 2,000 Rand, they would deliver on the invoice 40 mattresses, of which we only really received one.
So there would be over-invoicing and falsification of the documentation relevant to the transaction.
Exactly like all the other transactions.
And the amount of the over-invoicing and ultimately the overpayment would be returned to BOSASA in cash.
Correct.
So the difference between this method and the other ones we have had is that in this case, BOSASA would get a little bit of something, but
Yes.
would pay much more than
Correct.
that. Yeah, okay.
Right. Now, I'd like to deal, please, with Mr. Venter and circumstances relevant to Mr. Venter's involvement with yourself during 2017.
Yes.
During 2017, what was Mr. Venter doing with you or in relation to yourself and what you were doing at the time?
Well, he was auditing us at that stage, and he was working with taxes and that type of thing. And then what happened was we had not a close relationship, but a business relationship. And are you specifically referring to November?
I'm referring to 2017, and I think it is November, yes. November and December.
Okay. So in November, he was aware that there was disruption within the group at BOSASA, and he wanted to follow suit with the other whistleblowers and report what he had done wrong in the whole process. What then ensued was a meeting with myself and the other whistleblowers. At one stage, we were up to about 22 of them that had all contacted me to come and whistleblow. He had the meeting with me and he commenced working on his statement. So he was allowed to use a facility that I'd provided, and he was working on his statement, and he wrote up a full statement. However, midway during 2017, November, I can't remember the exact date, he had completed his statement, but he had decided he's no longer going to whistleblow because he had been offered a substantial amount of money by Gavin Watson not to whistleblow. And there was a meeting, and there was something about putting his hand on the Bible and swearing before the Almighty that he would not whistleblow, and he has not signed his statement. So we left him. We'd given him the opportunity to join a larger group, which made it more effective. Number one, in terms of being attacked and being threatened. And number two, it was an opportunity to come clean. So he wrote his statement and he just never came back. What then happened was, and he then got cornered, put in a corner by Mr. Watson, and Mr. Watson convinced him over a period of 4 hours that that was not the way to go. And he then called Mr. Van Tonder and said that he's not whistleblowing anymore, purely because he's been, he doesn't know where the money is going to come from, and where he's going to live from. Mr. Watson then had him on his side. And then during December, Mr. Van Tonder and myself received a call. Please, guys, can I meet with you before I go away on holiday? So I said, you're more than welcome. I don't got nothing to hide, but you're definitely not meeting me alone. You're going to meet me with somebody else. And at that meeting, which was, I think it was about the 10th or the 7th of December, he then turned around and said, well, he would like to rejoin us. And my words to him were very clear. I said to him, I said, you know, Piet, I understand what your issue is, but I can't guarantee you finances because I've been looking after like 20 families already. I've been supporting them. I've been feeding them. I can't come and give you money. But if you want to come clean and you believe in your heart that it's the right thing to do, then you will do your statement. And I left it at that.
Who was at that meeting?
Andries van Tonder was at that meeting. The meeting was held because I was on my way to go buy some chicken pies at the chicken pie on the way to Lanseria. And it was in the afternoon at about 2 o'clock. And I made that very clear to him. And I said to him, I said, if you're going to come clean and you want to get this off your chest, then you have to do it your way. I'm definitely not going to support you. I'm supporting enough people already. I can't take you under my wing as well. I'm sorry. And that's what happened. I then received a call from him to say that he had decided, he had spoken to whoever, his wife and that, and he was going to send us the statement signed. I can't remember exactly what day he signed the statement or who attested to the statement, but he had it commissioned and he had it signed. So I said, well, enjoy your holiday, and when you get back, let's just sit and let's go through your statement and make sure that you've crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's. He actually even used a format that I developed because I was asked to develop a format, a structure of the actual document for Andries van Tonder's statement. So he actually had borrowed that one as well. And then he came back and he sent us a statement, which was he had the annexures and everything to it. And then he came back and he said to us that no, he had met with Gavin again, and this was mid-January, and he had had a life-changing Damascus experience. And he didn't realize we were dealing with dangerous people. Now, I did not take the call, so I don't want to comment on that, and that one of the other witnesses will comment on. What did perturb me was that I was told that he had been shown pictures of one of the other witnesses' nieces that are very close to Andries van Tonder. And that concerned me. And I then told Andries we cut all contact with him because quite simply he is bad news. And I cut contact with him because he wasn't doing it for the right reasons. He was doing it for ulterior motives. And when kids start coming into play, when threats are made and photos are taken of little girls, I have a major problem. I don't add it in my statement, but I can mention to you that I confronted the person that did that. But I won't go there.
All right.
And that's what happened, and that's how we got Andries van Tonder's statement.
So
Sorry, Piet Venter's
Venter's
statement.
statement, yeah. Okay, thank you.
I understand the sequence then very broadly to be, and there may be more detail in due course. Piet Venter was part of a group of contemplated whistleblowers working with you.
That is correct, Chair.
Pursuant to that, he was preparing a statement recording matters relevant to the whistleblowing exercise.
That is correct, Chair.
He met with you and one other in December. Well, before that, he stated his intention to withdraw from the whistleblowing exercise.
That is correct.
However, he came to you early December and one other and said he wished to rejoin the whistleblowing exercise in collaboration with the rest of the group.
That is correct.
You told him then, well, if that is so, please turn your statement into a sworn affidavit.
That is correct, Chair.
That happened during the December period.
That is correct.
On his return in January, he came back to you and said no, he no longer wished to be part of the group.
That is correct, Chair, and I'd like to add there.
Yes.
At that time as well, there were rumors going around that I'd forced him to make a statement.
Yes.
At that stage, he was in Mossel Bay on holiday. I was in Dainfern.
Okay.
All right. We'll come to that detail in a moment. If you look at Annexure F on page 252, that's in Exhibit S1. Chair, the status of this affidavit, the information contained in this affidavit will, I'm informed by the investigators, be a matter of some controversy. In order to deal with that controversy, it's necessary to go through the contents of the affidavit, and in particular to deal with the references to Mr. Agrizzi, if there is such a reference to him in the affidavit. Nevertheless, I would like to deal with this affidavit on the basis of establishing from the witness the circumstances which to his knowledge surrounded its delivery to him, its signing, what happened before, what happened afterwards in relation to the whistleblowers, and what he knows of the correctness of the facts contained here. So we don't necessarily rely on this affidavit to prove the facts in the affidavit, certainly at this stage. That may happen later. But at this stage, it's merely to say, Mr. Agrizzi, what do you say about the fact referred to here? Is it true and correct?
That's fine.
Thank you. All right, so if we can go to page 252, please. Do you have it there? Do you recognize this document?
I do.
Is this the affidavit of which you've spoken?
That's correct.
Please go for a moment to page 266.
You said
see
you
their
should go
signature?
to, I'm sorry. You said
266.
266.
Correct, I'm there.
Do you see a signature there
Yes, I do.
under the name Petrus Stephanus Venter?
That's his signature.
Do you know the signature?
It is his signature.
And underneath the signature are the words 19th day of December 2017 at George, Western Cape, South Africa.
Correct.
To your knowledge, at that time, 19 December 2017, where was Mr. Venter holidaying?
He was in Mossel Bay, I think he mentioned, or George, close by.
All right. And if you look at the bottom of the page, 266, you will see the affirmation on oath, signed and sworn, stroke affirmed to me at, and I can't read those words, I don't know if you can, but there's a date there, 18 December 2017.
Correct.
And at the bottom of the page is a signature of a Commissioner of Oaths, and at the bottom of the, further down at the bottom of the page, full names, status, I think it's warrant officer, and a street address in Mossel Bay.
Correct.
I think it's Mossel Street. And that is repeated over the page on page 267.
Correct.
Do you see that?
Correct.
So on the face of it, at least, this affidavit was attested to in December 2017 in the Western Cape or Eastern Cape, I'm not sure. Mossel Bay and George are in the Western Cape. But they're in the Cape,
Yes.
far from Gauteng. At
Correct.
this time, where were you?
I was in Danford.
All right, let's go back to page
Sorry,
250.
Can I clarify?
Yeah.
Danfern in 4 ways, and on that specific day, on the 18th of December, I can actually get witnesses that witnessed that I was actually alongside the pool with having a braai with my brother
In Gauteng.
in Gauteng.
Yeah.
Yes, there's also the 19th, but for the moment you were in Danfern on both the 18th and the 19th.
Unfortunately, yes.
Mr. Agrizzi, we now need to deal with the contents of the affidavit on the basis that I've spoken to the Chair about. Chair, would this be a convenient time? It's 1 o'clock.
Yes, it is. We'll take the lunch adjournment and we'll resume at 2 o'clock.
Thank you.
We adjourn.
Sorry? I wouldn't dare. On receipt of a note, I've learnt. You know how people get scared of moths and snakes and things.